Hey guys, it's good to be able to reach out to you guys again. And for today's particular discussion, we're going to wind up talking about the 1971 Stanford prison experiment created and conducted by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. In the videos that I had you guys watch, the first one winds up being a fairly parsimonious telling of the story by Dr. Zimbardo himself. In the second one, told by Dr. Zimbardo, that's much longer through the TED Talk that he winds up giving on the psychology of evil, he winds up giving a little bit more information, particularly about the awful events that happened in Abu Ghraib in Iraq. For today, I'm going to focus primarily on his original experiment, though I will attempt to talk about what it is that happened in Abu Ghraib as well. So in the original experiment, as conducted by Dr. Zimbardo, he puts an ad out in the school newsletter saying that he is willing to wind up paying students $15 a day, which would roughly equate to about $100 a day in 2020 standards, which is pretty darn enticing for a college student where money is particularly tight on. He has a fairly large amount respond, and he decides that he is going to keep 24 of the over 70 plus that respond to the article in the school newspaper. With those 24, he says that he gives a simple psychological questionnaire as to do you use drugs, what do you do for fun, etc., to try and understand what it is exactly these people are and make sure that, according to him, they are mentally competent in taking part in this trial. After he selects those 24, he makes 12 he labels prison guards, and 12 he labels prisoners. The prison guards are given khaki or tan-colored suits. They're given police batons, whistles, handcuffs, and most importantly, he gives them silver reflective sunglasses, or aviators if you guys are more comfortable with aviators. The prisoners are picked up by a mock police setup. They are charged and booked and fingerprinted, and then they are stripped of all of their clothes. They're given prison smocks that have particular numbers on them. And for the rest of the experiment, they are no longer allowed to be called by their own name. They are only to be referred to by their prison number, which is an important thing that we'll talk about in just a little bit. After they wind up being booked in the mock police setup, the prisoners are placed into their prison cages and prison cells where they have a bed and reasonable access to toiletries and brushing their teeth and clothes and blankets, etc., to keep things fairly civil as the way they should be in a real prison. The prison guards are then loosely instructed to make sure that the prisoners do not get out of line. Neither Zimbardo or any of his colleagues tell the prisoners exactly what it is that they are allowed to do to keep those prisoners in charge. They wind up starting off, as most individuals probably would, with physical punishment. If the prison guards feel like the prisoners are out of line, they start with simple commands, like you'll say please and thank you when I address you. You'll do as you are told. You will do push-ups, and they make them do simple physical things. At that point, the prisoners decide that there is going to be some type of rebellion, for lack of a better term, to make sure that they're not going to have to tolerate what it is that these pseudo prison guards are putting them through. So they start to rebel. They yell back at the prison guards. They put their hands on the bars. They say that they're not going to put up with any of their stuff. There's a lot of different examples that wind up coming to be in the videos that you guys watched. At that point, Dr. Zimbardo explains, and he's justifiably so, the prison guards begin to fill into a role in which they believe, for whatever reason, they perceive these prisoners, who clearly are no different than the prison guards when they are sampled, as dangerous. So they start doing increasingly more scary or intense physical punishments, forcing them to scrub their toilets by hand, stripping them of their blankets, taking away their clothes, hosing them down with fire extinguisher discharge, which is incredibly uncomfortable and cold. They do a lot more physical things. And the first actual prison guard to really truly take control, his name is Dave Eshelman, decides that he's going to fulfill a role of an old movie character named John Wayne. I'm going to take control. I'm going to be the biggest, as he puts it, badass that I can, so that individuals realize what my power is and how I have power over them. He decides to be the leader of the prison guards. He's the one that the other prison guards will look up to. He's the one that the other prison guards will say, I will follow your orders. At that point, the study becomes incredibly novel in the fact that Zimbardo says that he is not performing or allowing himself to get involved with the experiment any more than he absolutely has to. He's not telling the prison guards what to do. He's not telling the prisoners to disobey. He is simply watching to see how human behavior takes off. At the end of the second day, roughly 48 hours or so, the first prisoner winds up rebelling and saying that I need to get out of here. He has a huge emotional disturbance and response, and he screams and wails, you need to let me go, you need to let me go. I can't possibly be in this experiment anymore. They decide to finally let him go, and they wind up ramping up the general harassment for the rest of those that are still continuing to be in the experiment. When pressed, Dave Eshelman says that he attempts to rationalize as to why the prison guards' behaviors keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. As he puts it, I'm not the one who's in charge. Dr. Zimbardo's in charge. If I myself or any of the other prison guards are doing something wrong, then they should stop us. But they're not stopping us. So we're just going to go as far as we think that we possibly can until someone tells us that we need to stop exactly what it is that we are attempting to do. Shortly after that, things go from a physical type of torture and punishment to a more psychological type of torture and punishment. They start pitting the prisoners against one another. They make certain prisoners sit in solitary confinement, which is particularly cruel and unusual. They make other prisoners chant out prisoners' numbers over and over and over. They wind up making prisoners choose their own needs over the other prisoners' needs. So 3 prisoners were allowed to have really, really nice, delicious food in a more safe and secure environment, while other prisoners who are labeled as being bad or disrespectful are given no food, or given no clothes, or given no blankets. The prison guards attempt to wind up allowing this disjointing of this prisoner union, that they attempt to break them down, they attempt to make them less civil, they attempt to pit them against one another. And shortly after the psychological assault on the prisoners, they get to a particularly disgusting and weird course of events that begins by day 4, in which Dave Eshelman himself says that if you really want to break someone down, it's not the physical stuff, it's not the psychological stuff. The best way that we can certainly break someone down winds up being through sexual hang-ups. They take away the clothes, they force them to hold each other, they force them to profess their love for one another, they force them to wear paper bags over their heads while walking around and touching each other. It gets particularly grotesque and disgusting. And a lot of individuals sit there and say, what is it that finally happened that made them want to get into this whole sexual hang-up thing? After the sexual assault of the prisoners, one prisoner starts to break down that night, another prisoner breaks down by night 5. And at that particular moment is more or less when the study goes completely off the rails. It's not that it isn't already off the rails, but it really goes off the rails when Dr. Zimbardo invites his girlfriend to come and see his social psychology experiment that he has helped to create. When she shows up, she sees that these prisoners are being treated like animals. The prison guards are well out of line and out of control. That the prisoners themselves are, as she puts it, being dehumanized. They're not treated like human beings anymore. There's civil disobedience. There winds up being an enormous amount of disgusting behaviors that these prison guards are putting these prisoners to. And she begs and pleads with Dr. Zimbardo. She says, if this is who you really are, and if this is who you really genuinely are interested in, then maybe we shouldn't date. Maybe I don't know you. Maybe I never knew you. And he attempts to rationalize. And he says, this is exactly what psychologists do. And he uses all sorts of particular psychological jargon that it winds up being exactly what we've always thought it would be. We had a fairly good idea as to how he puts it, how de-individuation occurs. I'll get to de-individuation in a second. And after listening to his girlfriend, Dr. Zimbardo winds up shutting the experiment down. It should have been shut down after day 2, after the first prisoner had a meltdown. But both he and the rest of the individuals involved in the experiment continued to go on just to see how far it would wind up going. At the end, they know that it went way too far and that they did way too many cruel, unusual, disgusting things to prisoners who deserved to have absolutely no mistreatment being done to them. So, the big takeaways from Dr. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment is that without any type of governing rules, people will turn to animals very, very shortly. You guys actually kind of see that right now with everything that seems to be going on with the coronavirus as things are going about. People will learn to take care of themselves and not so much other people. People will wind up acting like animals, hoarding things and taking things that they really clearly don't need. Similarly, though not exactly the same, in the prison experiment, the biggest thing that Zimbardo is looking for is a concept called de-individuation. De-individuation is when an individual loses their sense of themselves when placed into an environment with a group of people. Being placed there, the prisoners, more specifically, wind up losing their sense of selves because they wind up having the shackles placed on their ankles. They wind up not being allowed to be referred to by their name. They wind up being referred to as their numbers only, and they chant the numbers at one another. The prison guards lose their sense of selves because they become drunk on power. Zimbardo just wanted to see how far these individuals will go in this particular experiment, and it very clearly winds up being who knows how far they would have gone had they not shut it down even after day 5. So Zimbardo's experiment is absolutely paramount in understanding what happens when individuals are governed without rules, without reciprocation, without any type of true punishment against treating other individuals without common decency, respect, and simple rules of engagement with prisoners. You guys learn in history class that due to individuals being kept in prison, even prisoners are given certain particular rules and what they are capable of being treated like, that they deserve to have food, they deserve to have a bed, they deserve to have ample bathing opportunities. In Zimbardo's experiment, the prison guards took away all of those things in due time. No food, no real bathing capabilities, that they wind up pitting them against one another. The one last thing that I wanted to discuss is, as Dr. Zimbardo explains, that even though his experiment was conducted in 1971, it winds up occurring almost play-by-play in 2004 in the prison of Abu Ghraib in Iraq, in which The United States Army Reservists became the prison guards, very, very similar to the prison guards in his experiment. And the Iraqi prisoners, well, they fulfilled the role of the prisoners in his original experiment. And everything came down to a T, as those photographs that you guys saw. From doing push-ups to stripping them of their clothes to putting bags over their head to making them do incredibly disgusting sexual behaviors, all while taking selfies with them. It's a very, very concrete way of saying that psychological concepts aren't just by experiment, but they wind up occurring in real life, in real time, as you guys saw with all the photographs in the TED Talk, according to Dr. Zimbardo. So de-individuation is really the name of the game here. And the Stanford prison experiment is most likely the most well-known social psychology, if not psychological experiment, perhaps ever in Introduction to Psychology. So, with that being said, I hope the video was helpful. I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. And therefore, I will continue to reach out and help you guys as best as I can. Be well, take care of your families, and good luck with all of your other studies.